Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the basic trig functions and how to decide when to use them. Not so much how to solve them, we're going to do that in class, but how to actually pick out which one you need to use and determining sides of a triangle. So when I talk about the trig functions, what I mean are sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay, even though for what we're doing here, we're not going to talk about tangent. Not that's not important, but we're not going to deal with it for right now. Okay, so first we need to get a little bit of terminology that you may or may not know already. Okay, so this is a right triangle, right? I'm going to put this here to symbolize that it's a right triangle. I need to show the angle that I'm going to be analyzing this triangle with. Okay, so what you do is on the triangle, you mark it with this little arc, and that means that this is going to be the angle that I'm referring to, as opposed to this complementary one up here, right? So when I talk about the angle, I'm going to represent angle instead of writing angle every time with the Greek letter theta. It's like a zero with a line drawn through it. That's the symbol for angle. So if this is my angle, the side that is opposite of it, directly across from the angle, that's called the opposite side, right? Obviously. Okay. And then the other side, the side that is actually touching this angle, the side down here, see how it actually touches the angle? That's called the adjacent side, because the word adjacent means next to. It's next to this angle. And then the other side is, obviously, you should know this, the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is the one that is opposite of the 90-degree angle, right? So really the only ones you have to pick out are which side is opposite of your angle and which side is adjacent to your angle. Okay, so to use these trig functions, there's a nifty little mnemonic to remember. And so what we're looking at is the length of the sides of the triangle, right? The length of the legs. So there's sine, there's cosine, and there's tangent. So we'll start with sine. Sine is the length of the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. The length of the cosine is the length of the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's the mnemonic to remember them. SOHCAHTOA. Alright, see it? SOHCAHTOA. So if, let's say, I have a triangle like this, and I'm given this opposite side and the hypotenuse, if I want to know this angle, I can use the sine function, because sine is opposite in hypotenuse. If I want to know something, like let's say I have this triangle, if I want to know what the length of the adjacent leg is, I would use the cosine function, because I have the hypotenuse and I want to know the adjacent. So it just depends on which function you use, depends on what sides you have or you want. Okay, so real quick, let me show you how this works. It's not like some sort of magic. It's just based on geometry. So let's say I have these two triangles, the red triangle and the blue triangle. So I didn't mean to draw the red triangle. Oh crap, it's just I can't draw, but oh well. So if you notice, both of these triangles have the same angle down here, and they're both right triangles, right? So that must mean that they have the same angle up here, because the internal angles all have to add up to 180, right? So the way sine, cosine, and tangent works is it doesn't matter how long the sides are. What matters is that the ratio of one side to another given an angle. So if I know this angle down here, the ratio of this opposite side to this adjacent side, for example, is always going to be the same, no matter if it's these on the blue triangle or these on the red triangle. The ratio, when I do the opposite side divided by the adjacent side, that's always going to equal some number, and that's the tangent function. It's just a lookup, right? So this is an example when I was in high school, I had to use this. It's a trig table. And a trig table is basically doing the same thing your calculator does, except your calculator, you just punch in the number and it looks it up. I had to actually look it up on a table. So consider yourself lucky. But it's nothing magic. It's just like a lookup of a ratio. And the ratio is always the same because of geometry. Okay, so let's do a little practice just to see if you can pick out which is opposite and which side is adjacent. Okay, so here's two triangles, and I've labeled both the angle down here and over here on these two, the angle that we're looking at, and I want you to pick which side on each triangle is the adjacent side. So I want you to tell me over here A, B, or C, over here D, E, or F, which of those three legs is the one that's adjacent to the angle. Okay, so you should have got, this should be pretty easy. The adjacent side over here is B because it's touching this angle, right? C is the hypotenuse and A is the opposite. And then on this triangle, the adjacent leg is E because D is the hypotenuse and F would be opposite. Okay, so one more time. Here's two more triangles, and here are the angles that we're going to look at. Now what I want you to do is tell me, for each triangle, what function you would have to use to solve for the given side. Not solve it, but just tell me which function. So are you going to use sine, are you going to use cosine, or are you going to use tangent? So over here, for this one, are you going to use sine to solve for A? Are you going to use cosine, or are you going to solve for tangent? Same thing for B. So give you a hint. Remember, SOHCAHTOA. Okay, so you should have gotten A is opposite, right? And if A is the opposite side, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So I would use the sine function. For B, B is the adjacent leg. And since adjacent cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, I would use the cosine function. Okay, so I hope that at least gave you the basics, if you didn't have it already, of the functions sine, cosine, and tangent. Well, mostly sine and cosine. You should be able to determine the opposite versus the adjacent side given a triangle and an angle. And you should also tell when to be able to use, the sine versus the cosine function on a triangle, right? Not actually solve it, we're going to do that in class, but just when to use it. So if you have any questions, if you didn't get anything, leave it in the comment box at the end of the video, and I will try to touch on it at the beginning of class before we start actually using this. And other than that, we'll see you in class. Thank you.